In the far reaches of the galaxy, where starlight bends around titanic fleets and kings carve their thrones from the bones of conquered worlds, the word human carried no weight. They were considered relics of an ancient war, scattered survivors who lacked a home, a people reduced to wandering merchants, mercenaries, and beggars. Empires measured strength in fleets, numbers, and technology. Humans had none of these in abundance. And yet, something had begun to shift in the whispers of the void. Merchants spoke of trade convoys disappearing on uncharted routes, only to have the stolen cargo mysteriously returned, untouched, with every single raider dead. In lawless fringes, bounty hunters whisper of an unseen figure dismantling entire strike teams without leaving footprints or digital traces. Rumors spread through black markets that there was a human out there, not a soldier or politician, but something older, colder, and impossibly efficient. Most dismissed it as space or folklore. One king did not. He ruled over an empire that spanned 3 arms of the spiral, an iron-fisted sovereign whose word could condemn planets. When reports reached his throne that a lone human had destroyed 2 of his covert outposts, he did not laugh. He summoned his council. Holograms of distant admirals flickered into place. Armor-clad ministers stood stiffly at attention, and across the war table were projected dossiers of his most elite assassins. 50 killers, each a legend in their own right. There were the neural ghosts who could erase memories with a glance, the stormwalkers who could kill in full view and vanish in a flash of light, the flesh weavers who could wear another person's skin like clothing. Every assassin in this room had toppled regimes and eliminated warlords who commanded fleets of their own. They were the king's most expensive tools, the sharpened blades that had carved his empire from the galaxy's soft flesh. "Bring me this human alive," he ordered, voice heavy with disdain. "Break them if you must, but breathing." The council chuckled at the absurdity of the task. 1 human against 50 specialists? It sounded less like a hunt and more like sport. A few suggested sending only half. The king silenced them with a glance. The mission was to be swift, overwhelming, absolute. And so they departed, scattered across systems where the human was rumored to have passed. On Carthos Prime, a jungle world choked with acidic mists, a trio of assassins tracked signs of human passage. Thermal traces, boot prints softened by time. They moved like ghosts, but something was wrong. Equipment failures struck at random. A drone scouting ahead spiraled into the canopy, as if its controls had been overridden. A suit's air filters clogged at the worst possible moment. A sniper found his rifle's charge depleted despite charging it that morning. Then silence. Their encrypted transmissions ended mid-word, replaced by static and the sound of distant running water. On Mirren Station, orbiting a dead moon, another team infiltrated an information hub. They found bodies already cooling. Whoever they'd come for had been there hours before them, and had somehow known their exact approach vectors. One assassin stepped into an empty corridor and triggered a floor plate so perfectly balanced that even his sensors missed it. A door sealed shut. Pressure dropped. His lungs froze solid before he could call for help. Another operative tried to override the locks only to find her own clearance codes already logged, as though someone had entered under her name before she arrived. On Ursith Outpost, hidden beneath the sands of an abandoned mining world, the assassins never even made it inside. The tunnels collapsed behind them in time sequence, cutting off escape routes. By the time their emergency beacons transmitted distress signals, nothing remained but dust clouds and broken rock. The king received fragments of their last moments. A helmet cam showing a figure, barely a shadow, moving faster than a combat drone's targeting array, and then darkness. Audio records of panic breathing, then silence. He dismissed the first failures as bad luck. Even the best tools can break. But when 7 more operatives failed to report back within 2 cycles, when 3 separate teams vanished without leaving a corpse, the whispers began to reach even the high halls of power. The story spread like wildfire. The human sees everything. The human fights like a machine, but thinks like a predator. The human doesn't just run, they hunt. Pirates refuse to take imperial coin for information on human activity. Mercenary guilds started charging triple to work near human space. Then came the first proof. A sealed container arrived at the Imperial Palace, delivered through official channels. The guards examined it for traps, finding none. When they opened it before the throne, the court fell silent. Inside lay the severed head of an assassin, renowned for killing entire royal families. His eyes were open, his expression calm, as if death had come without warning. Between his teeth was clenched a thin sliver of alloy etched with crude lettering. "Stop hunting me." The king crushed the shard in his hand. His rage echoed to the vast hall, shaking even the ministers who had once laughed. In his fury, he ordered all surviving assassins to abandon their separate hunts and converge on the human's last known location. There would be no more mistakes, no more underestimating this prey. If the lone survivor of Earth thought they could mock the throne, they would soon learn the price of defiance. Across the galaxy, 50 blades turned as one and flew toward the shadow they had been sent to kill or capture. Yet none of them wondered why their target had allowed that first head to be sent back at all. None of them asked why a human, if so deadly, would warn instead of simply slaughtering them in silence. The answer waited for them in the darkness between stars. The assassins gathered on the barren world chosen as the kill ground, a desolate sphere of iron-rich canyons and toxic winds. 50 operatives, each used to working alone, stood under the shadow of their own reputations. They did not speak much to one another. Professional killers rarely needed to. Their presence alone was enough to silence the land itself. Any other prey would have felt the weight of that convergence and broken long before they arrived. But the human gave no sign of fear, no transmission, no movement. It was as though their quarry had simply vanished into the rock. The first hint that something was wrong came before they even began their sweep. One insertion craft went dark in mid-descent. No distress call, no impact crater, no wreckage. The second landed but found its engines already offline, sabotaged by an error in its own startup code. Someone had rewritten its systems from inside, but none of the security logs showed tampering. The remaining ships tightened perimeter scans, only to discover that their encrypted channels were filled with meaningless noise, their own prearranged codes looping back at them as if reflected by a mocking voice. Moving in teams, the assassins swept the valleys with seismic sensors and aerial drones. Each specialist relied on their tools, their implants, their proven methods. None considered that the human had spent weeks studying how each of them worked. The traps were not crew explosives or simple ambushes. They were precision-tailored. One operative stealth suit simply shut down mid-patrol, forcing him into visibility just long enough for an unseen hand to sever his air supply. Another tried to hack into local communications only to have her neural implant overridden, broadcasting her exact location to every nearby killer. Before any of them could react, a single suppress shot ended her. The human was not simply avoiding them. They were dismantling the hunt piece by piece. Assassins began to die in ways that felt impossibly personal. The poison master found his own rare toxins circulating through his bloodstream, fed by a micro-drone that had injected him while he slept inside what he believed was an impregnable tent. The telepath, whose mind reading had crushed 100 leaders before they spoke a single word, reported nothing but echoes, his own thoughts bouncing back louder, and louder until they drowned out all reason. He put his sidearm to his own head to silence the noise. The snipers, perched high in the cliffs, discovered their rifles jammed solid at the exact moment their scopes locked onto movement. Heat signatures they tracked turned out to be decoys, hollow suits rigged with thermal packs, placed hours earlier where no wind could shift them. A demolition expert, suspicious of everything, spent hours disarming an explosive charge only to realize too late that it was never armed. The real trap waited under his feet, triggered by his own heartbeat. Panic spread, though few would admit it aloud. These were not soldiers who broke easily, but their mission logs told the truth. Growing fear, erratic behavior, refusal to trust one another. Some formed pairs, others went entirely dark, abandoning communication to avoid giving away position. They hunted as if the human were an animal, but what they faced was a predator who understood hunters better than they understood themselves. The humans' tactics shifted constantly. When the assassins switched to thermal tracking, their quarry ran cold by masking body heat, with improvised insulation. When they used drones, they found those same drones feeding them false data, as though the human could predict their patrol patterns before they were decided. When they attempted to triangulate position using sound, they heard only the cries of their own wounded playing back from hidden speakers. Every move they made was anticipated, Every countermeasure counted again, as if their target had memorized every page of the assassin's handbook and written several new chapters. Hours turned into days. The kill team's numbers thinned rapidly. Bodies were rarely found whole. Some simply vanished without a trace. Aerial scans showed nothing but empty desert, yet the corpses would later appear in places already swept clean, laid out in rows as though on display. It was no longer clear the human was even trying to escape. It was beginning to feel like they were luring the assassins deeper, testing their reactions, studying how they fought, and striking when each was at their most vulnerable. Desperation drove them to call for orbital support. The Empire's command denied it. The king wanted this operation silent. To admit failure was unthinkable. The order remained the same: capture the human alive at any cost. Extraction would come only when the mission was complete. Trapped between an unyielding throne and an unseen killer, the assassins pressed on. Entire squads were lost overnight. A trio vanished while sleeping despite full perimeter alarms, and when their comrades reached the site, they found no blood, no drag marks, only 3 helmets lined up neatly on a ridge, facing sunrise. A strike leader tried to rally his remaining forces, demanding they stop hiding and fight in the open. He lasted 2 minutes before a precisely aimed shot, taken from an impossible angle, ended him mid-sentence. The survivors began to turn on one another, accusing rivals of betrayal, convinced the human had an inside source. But there was no betrayal, only perfect observation. The human seemed to know every plan before it was executed, every fallback position before it was taken. Some began to believe they weren't hunting one person at all, that this was an entire human network, a ghost of vision left over from some forgotten war. How else could one lone figure outthink 50 of the galaxy's most dangerous predators? As numbers dwindled to single digits, the slaughter accelerated. No elaborate traps now, no prolonged games. The humans struck with brutal efficiency. A single move, one kill, vanish again. Those who tried to flee found their escape routes sabotaged. Landing craft detonated on ignition. Emergency beacons broadcast false coordinates, luring fugitives straight into ambushes. The last transmissions were incoherent bursts of terror, recorded by black box implants and later recovered by Imperial scouts. A voice gasping for breath whispering, "It's already here." Another pleading for extraction. Another shouting that they could see the human's eyes in the dark, even though no one else ever reported seeing the human at all. And then silence. No team reported mission success. No body of a human was ever found. But weeks later, a single drone emerged from hyperspace near the Imperial capital. It carried no identification, no active beacon, yet it navigated palace defenses as though it had been pre-cleared. Inside its cargo bay lay a cryo case. When guards opened it before the throne, cold mist poured across the polished floor. The palace was silent for the first time in living memory. No courtiers whispered, no advisors muttered over star charts, no generals barked reports. Even the security drones glided without sound, as if unwilling to disturb the stillness that had settled like a burial shroud. The king sat unmoving on his throne, staring at the cryo case that still lay open at his feet. 50 faces looked up at him, eyes wide, lips frozen mid-breath. The finest assassins his empire had ever bred were gone, their mission not simply a failure, but a warning written in flesh. The whispers began at the edges of power, where fear always takes root first. Governors spoke in hushed tones of an earthborn phantom, a killer so efficient that no fortress could hold against it. Merchants whispered in the docking bays that humanity was not as weak as everyone believed. Smugglers sold recordings of the assassination logs on black markets, grainy audio of hardened killers screaming into static. Each retelling added new details, that the human could vanish into thin air, that they could shut down cybernetic implants with thought, that they were not one person but a remnant of a secret Earth army waiting to rise again. The king's ministers advised silence, but silence only fed the rumors. The more the Empire tried to erase the story, the faster it spread. Star systems that had been loyal for generations began questioning imperial decrees. Trade guilds stopped accepting contracts that involved hunting humans. Bounty boards scrubbed their listings, afraid that taking the king's coin would make them targets too. The idea of humanity, small and scattered as it was, had shifted overnight from pitted relic to lurking terror. The king convened his high council in the war chamber, a place of cold light and colder reason. They spoke of retaliation, of mass purges, of burning every world rumor to harbor humans. But every suggestion faltered under the weight of the obvious. They could not even find one of them. How would they fight an enemy invisible and unpredictable? They had sent 50 blades and watched them all snap without ever seeing the hand that broke them. Paranoia crept through the Empire like poison in the bloodstream. The palace guards no longer trusted their own scanners. Officers slept in sealed rooms, fearing that a human might already be inside the walls. Assassin guilds sent formal refusals, stating that any future contract involving humans would be considered a death sentence. Even mercenary fleets, loyal only to coin, began turning away Imperial envoys. The cost was not worth the risk. Then came the broadcast. No one knew how the human did it. On 1,000 worlds, across secure military channels and private networks alike, every screen lit up at once. The image was nothing but darkness. A voice, calm and steady, spoke in every tongue of the Empire. There was no anger in it, no triumph, no malice, only the clarity of unshakable intent. We do not forgive hunts. We hunt back. Leave us alone, and you will not see us again. Continue, and you will not see anything at all. The message lasted less than 10 seconds. There was no trace of how it had been transmitted, no origin to track, no signature to decode. In its wake came silence deeper than before. For the first time in his reign, the king hesitated. His throne had been built on fear, but fear was now working against him. If he pushed harder, the legend would only grow. If he ignored it, the legend would still grow. The question was no longer whether the human could be stopped. It was whether the Empire itself could survive the attempt. In a private council that stretched through a sleepless night, his advisors argued. Some demanded escalation. Scorched earth campaigns on frontier worlds rumored to shelter human stragglers. Others warned that even the threat of such actions might spark rebellion among alien vassals already questioning imperial power. One old minister, voice shaking, asked a question no one wanted to hear. If there is one human who can do this, what happens if there are more? By dawn, the king gave his decision. There would be no public announcement. All records concerning humans were to be purged from the imperial archives. Every intelligence report mentioning them would be sealed, every informant silenced, every bounty withdrawn. Officially, humans would become what they had been before the hunt began, insignificant, forgotten, irrelevant. The Empire would act as though they did not exist at all. But fear has a way of spreading even faster than fire. The purge of records did nothing to calm the galaxy. In the void beyond imperial control, the story only grew. To smugglers and outlaws, the human became a folk hero. To soldiers and assassins, they became a nightmare whisper about over empty glasses. To rival powers, they became a question with no answer. Was humanity truly extinct, or had they merely learned to hide better than anyone thought possible? On remote stations, graffiti appeared overnight. Crude sketches of a faceless figure, the words we hunt back scrawled beneath. Pirate crews who once preyed on human refugees now offered them shelter, hoping to earn favor with the ghosts who had humbled an empire. Worlds that had lived in fear of imperial wrath found a strange, defiant courage in the tale. If one lone human could bring the throne to its knees, perhaps the empire was not as invincible as it claimed. The king tightened his grip on power, but every harsh decree only reminded his people of the one predator he could not touch. Ministers no longer laughed at the mention of humans. Fleet commanders no longer dismissed them as relics. A single unknown warrior had reshaped the balance of fear across entire sectors, without firing a shot in open combat. Deep in the cold void where no beacon shone, the human vanished once more. They sent no further messages, issued no further threats. They simply disappeared, leaving the galaxy to wonder where the next shadow might fall. Some believed the human had gone into hiding forever. Others believed they were already moving on to the next hunt. A few whispered that they were never alone to begin with, that humanity had been waiting, scattered and silent, for the moment when someone would remind the stars why Earth's children were once feared. The Empire never sent another assassin, not because the king had grown merciful, but because even a tyrant knows when to stop bleeding. In the dark halls of power, Among admirals and generals, a new unspoken rule took root. Do not pursue humans. Do not threaten them. Do not draw their gaze. Across the galaxy, the legend solidified. Humanity was no longer seen as a dying species clinging to the edges of relevance. They were predators hiding in plain sight, dangerous not because of numbers or fleets or weapons, but because of the will that burned in every survivor. One person had shown what that will could do when cornered. And so the galaxy learned its lesson, the kind of lesson that echoes for generations. Humans are few, but they are never weak. They are never prey. And when hunted, they do not run. They hunt back.